Imagine your entire religion, your people's deepest hope, the prophecy that has guided your ancestors for centuries, was written by someone else. Not by a god, not by a prophet, but by a sisterhood of political operatives who needed a safety net. This is the story of the greatest manipulation in the Dune universe, and it happened long before Paul Atreides ever set foot on Arrakis. To understand what was done to the Fremen, you first have to understand who the Bene Gesserit truly were. Most people who have seen the films know them as mysterious women, advisors, power brokers, the ones who move quietly through the halls of empire while emperors and dukes believe themselves to be in control. But that barely scratches the surface. The Bene Gesserit were the most sophisticated long-term power structure in human history. They did not think in years or decades. They thought in centuries, in bloodlines, in the slow, patient accumulation of influence across generations of noble houses, royal courts, and religious institutions spanning the entire known universe. They trained their bodies to levels that defied belief. A Bene Gesserit sister could control her own biochemistry, alter her vocal tone to make any human being comply against their will, and read the micro-expressions of a face well enough to detect lies before the liar had finished forming the thought. They placed their daughters in the beds of the most powerful men alive, not out of submission, but out of strategy. Every child born of a Bene Gesserit mother was a carefully calculated genetic step toward a goal so vast it spanned thousands of years.
That goal was the Kwisatz Haderach, a being of such extraordinary mental and physical capability that they could navigate futures no human mind could survive seeing. A weapon of absolute precision. A messiah, built to order. But weapons require control, and control requires preparation. So the Bene Gesserit created something they called the Missionaria Protectiva. Their own internal documents described it as the black arm of superstition.
The mission of the Missionaria Protectiva was as elegant as it was cold. Send sisters ahead to the forgotten worlds, the desperate worlds, the places where people had nothing left but faith. Study the existing religion, map the fears, understand the mythology already present, and then carefully, surgically expand it. Add a prophecy, a promise, a figure who would one day come to deliver the people from their suffering. Make the description specific enough to be compelling, but vague enough that a Bene Gesserit sister, trained and prepared, could fulfill it if she ever needed shelter or protection on that world. Then, simply leave. Let the legend grow. Let it pass from parent to child across generations until it became indistinguishable from ancient truth. The Missionaria Protectiva was not one operation. It was hundreds of operations, deployed across scores of worlds, a galaxy-spanning insurance policy funded by faith and paid out in human belief. And Arrakis was one of its most important targets. The Fremen were a people shaped entirely by suffering. Their ancestors, the Zen-Sunni wanderers, had spent thousands of years being driven from world to world, persecuted, enslaved, discarded, until they found themselves on the most hostile planet in the known universe and decided to stop running. Arrakis did not welcome them. It tried to kill them every single day. The heat alone was enough to drain a body of moisture in hours. The sandstorms could strip flesh from bone. And beneath the surface, creatures the size of city blocks moved through the deep sand, drawn by rhythm, drawn by sound, drawn by the faint heartbeat of anything foolish enough to walk carelessly on the open dunes. But the Fremen endured. More than endured, they mastered Arrakis in ways that outsiders could barely comprehend. They learned to walk without rhythm, to collect every drop of moisture their bodies produced, to read the desert like a language. They became extraordinary, And yet beneath all of that capability, beneath all of that hardened survival, they carried the wound every displaced people carries. The hope that one day it would end, that someone would come, that the suffering had a purpose, that the desert would bloom. The Bene Gesserit found that wound, and they built a prophecy around it. A legend was seeded deep into Fremen culture across generations of careful cultivation. The story of a man who would come from beyond the stars, born of a Bene Gesserit mother, gifted with sight beyond sight, a voice that could move mountains and bend will. He would be called the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. And he would carry a second name, the Mahdi, the one who will lead us to paradise. The Fremen did not discover this prophecy in an ancient text. They did not receive it from a god. It was placed inside their culture like a seed, and tended invisibly for centuries until it had grown roots too deep to question. Now here is where the story turns, because the Bene Gesserit did not send Paul Atreides to Arrakis as their instrument. In fact, Paul was never supposed to exist at all. The Bene Gesserit breeding program had been running for thousands of years, 90 generations of careful genetic selection across the noble houses of the Imperium, moving step by patient step toward the Kwisatz Haderach. Their plan for the final generation was precise. The daughter of House Atreides was to be bred with Fade Harkonnen, heir to their most bitter enemy. The union of those two bloodlines, carrying centuries of accumulated genetic refinement from both sides, would produce the one they had been working toward, a daughter, not a son, a daughter who would carry the bloodline forward under Bene Gesserit supervision and control. But Lady Jessica defied them. She loved Duke Leto Atreides, and when she carried his child, she made a choice that no Bene Gesserit sister was permitted to make. She chose love over the program. She chose her Duke over the sisterhood's thousand-year design. She gave him a son. That son was Paul. The sisterhood was furious. Paul was unplanned, unscheduled, a generation ahead of where the bloodline was supposed to be, and because he was male, he could access genetic memories and prescient pathways that female Bene Gesserit could not. His power was real, but it was also completely outside their ability to predict or contain. When the Emperor and the Harkonnen conspired to destroy House Atreides, when Duke Leto was killed and the world Paul had known was obliterated in a single brutal night, Paul and Jessica fled into the one place their enemies believed would finish the job for them, the deep desert of Arrakis. And there, alone in the sand, with enemies above and a hostile planet beneath, Jessica made her calculation. She knew the Missionaria Protectiva's work on Arrakis. She had been trained in exactly what the sisterhood had planted here centuries before her birth. She knew the shape of the prophecy. She knew the words that would trigger recognition in a Fremen heart. She had fled into the desert as a fugitive, but she could walk out of it as something else entirely. The decision she made in those early days among the Fremen was perhaps the most consequential choice any individual made in the entire history of the Dune universe. She chose to use the prophecy, to activate it, to allow the Fremen to see in her son exactly what generations of careful mythological preparation had primed them to see. Everything that followed was performance. Jessica genuinely came to love the Fremen. Paul genuinely possessed abilities that staggered even her. But the framing, the presentation, the way each demonstration of Paul's power seemed to align perfectly with the ancient legend, that was engineered. When the Fremen tested them, and they tested them relentlessly, Jessica passed every trial. Paul's abilities were real. The prophecy that framed them was a script. And Shani, the Fremen woman who loved Paul more than any legend ever could, never fully believed it. From the beginning to the end of her life, she saw the machinery underneath the miracle. She watched the people she loved surrender themselves to a story that someone else had written. and she resisted it with everything she had. She was right. But here is the question that should unsettle you long after this video ends. Does it matter? The prophecy was manufactured. The Bene Gesserit wrote it. Jessica activated it. Paul fulfilled it not because the universe demanded it, but because the conditions had been carefully arranged across centuries to make fulfillment almost inevitable once the right pieces were in place. And yet, the Harkonnen cruelty was real. The Emperor's betrayal was real. The Fremen's suffering across thousands of years of displacement and exploitation was real. Paul's abilities were real. His love for the Fremen people became real. His fury at what had been done to them was real. The legend was false, but the revolution it unleashed was not. And this is where Frank Herbert placed his deepest, most uncomfortable warning. Because the jihad that followed Paul's rise, the holy war fought in his name across the stars, did not kill thousands. It did not kill millions. In the years following Paul taking the throne of the Imperium, the religious war that spread through the universe in his name killed more than 60 billion human beings. 60 billion. Paul saw it coming. His prescient visions, the very gift that made the prophecy seem real, showed him rivers of blood spreading across 100,000 worlds. He saw it clearly. He tried to find another path. He searched futures obsessively for any route that avoided the carnage. He found almost none. There was nothing he could do to avoid what was to come, all stemming from one huge, ancient lie. Beware the person who arrives with exactly the answers your faith was built to accept. Beware the system that builds the faith and then provides the profit. And most of all, beware the story you have been told since birth as ancient and sacred and true, because someone, somewhere, may have written it.